was thinking about a composition or a concept of lighting around some waterfalls, okay? I did a recent waterfall scene and kind of it's full of kind of glowing illuminated light within the mist that's kicked up by the churning waters. And it got me thinking that I wanted to try something with those light beams and how kind of that same type of mist created by churning waters would affect light beams coming across. So I usually do these continuous light beams, but I thought we could really alter the effect of them by how much we illuminate them going through the various points of mist within the piece. I really need to clean this off in here. That's I think I used some of the versifying black on there, so it's not giving me a perfect impression. But like I said in the last piece, and I haven't cleaned my stamp off, that won't matter too much. It should print a little bit more solid, but that's where a bunch of mist is going to go anyway, so it doesn't really matter. Okay, now this second one I'm going... let's see, should I stamp it up a little bit higher? I usually put this one to the right of the Brook Falls. This is Babbling Brook. But I thought, well, I like to mix things up and kind of change things around when I do scenes, you know, it's just so I don't get bored with, you know, the same type of composition or, you know, the usage of the stamps in the same exact way. Okay, now, these are on different levels. I mean, you could do other things. I could have another one back here if I want to, but I want this light beam configuration to be streaming across that area. Okay, this is the Brookside Boulders right here. Now, if you notice, we're not doing any type of masking. It's just simply not needed in most stamping that I do with these stamps. Masking is okay. I mean, you can certainly do it if you want to, but I try to design my stamps where, you know, there's as little needed as possible. I consider it kind of tedium to do at least any type of careful masking, okay? Cutouts and things like that. I mean, periodically when I have some kind of object, you know, and I have something in back of it, I will need to mask it off, so I'll have a traditional cut mask, but otherwise you're just overlapping everything, and hopefully, you know, the imagery is so continuous that you can't see where one image ends and the other one begins, okay? And that requires overlapping, which would, you know, go counter to careful masking. So anyway, so this one's right up here, and you can see I just used a tiny little smidgen of it right here 2 more times to create this little bit of a foreground here. I don't want to go up too far because I wanted to create this little pool of water here where the waterfall falls are kind of feeding into, okay? All right, so this is Twisting Pine here. I'm going to have some pine trees in here. I don't want too much of them, but I want them to be in a space in here, okay, where they'll be illuminated. The light will be coming from the left side of the scene. So watch what I do here. This is a lesson that I did in the Stampscaping University series, recent series, where we do kind of a selective usage of varying values, which in this case means how much ink is on your stamp. It's just an easy tweak here. Okay, so I went with black and some of this olive brown here, okay, on this pen, just to get some variation in here. All right, so the light is coming from the left side of the scene. Here's this image stamped to the right of it. So on this side right here, you have to remember that you're doing the opposite side, you know, when you're taking ink off here. But what we're going to do is we're going to take some of the ink off of the left side here. See, I mean, it's taking off a pretty good amount. All right. Now this is the extent of the masking that we're going to need here. Okay. You just mask off your rocks like so. Have about a 1/4 inch of them showing. Okay. And we're not going to stamp all the tree because it's not going to fit in there, so we're only using a small portion of it. But hopefully, on the side that we've removed some of the ink, it stamps out lighter, facing the light. It's an easy tweak to kind of give yourself a really good head start when it comes to lighting in here, okay? Alright, I didn't ink up that other side of it enough. Alright. I think my black is a little bit dry too. Here, let's give it a little bit more ink with my re-inker. Okay, a little bit of olive brown on here. You don't need to do the olive brown. You could just stamp this on black or just a really dark color, okay? Okay, so let's try this again. We'll go for multiple impressions. Okay, so left side illumination. Taking off ink off that side, like that. Cover it up. We'll put a little bank of trees in here, okay? I'll go a little bit lower, and I'll overlap that other impression a little bit. Okay, a little bit more pressure. Okay, there we go. That's what I want right there. You notice how that first one didn't really stamp out according to, you know, how I wanted it, but just to come, it doesn't really matter in scenic stamping. If you get something that you don't want, I mean, if you had a position or something like that, you can just, you know, do it again, but you really don't need that type of thing. Scenic stamping is really, I don't know. I think it's probably the most forgiving style of stamping ever, because if you get some kind of area that, you know, didn't stamp out right, all you do is just put a tree over it or something, or you put it in darkness or whatever, and it just simply doesn't really matter, okay? All right, now I'll put another tree on this side, okay? But I'll have the lighting illuminated on this side. Okay. So, we'll take off some ink off the other side. Now, okay, I need to ink up more than I think I'll need. This one's going all the way down here, so. Okay, let's see. Okay. Move some ink off this side, dab it down. I'm probably dabbing about 3/4 of an inch into it, and I'll dab off a little bit more off the extreme right side of it, okay? Okay, let's see here. Okay, see that right there? Where that lighting is already started. We have left side illumination and right side illumination here. So the light is coming from here. It's illuminating these branches. This side is illuminating the other side. Okay. Let's do kind of extend that concept a little bit. If I did a tree right here, it would be top illuminated, right? So you take ink off the top portion of it like so. Taper it though, don't just take it off like that and leave like a real distinct line. You want to take off a little bit more off the top, and then as you move down, you're taking off a little bit less. So it goes from dry, medium, to wet, okay? And hopefully light, medium, dark. Okay? There's our mask right there, and I'll use the top of the tree. Like so. Alright. So you see it's kind of building up, and we can put some more out this way. Okay. Like so. I'm gonna put a little bit more pressure right around the, your paper towel. Even though it's not very thick, it does still have some mass to it. Okay. I think I removed the wrong side of the, did I remove the wrong side there? I might have removed the wrong side, because that's now right side illuminated. Okay, it's not going to matter, though. At least over here, that side's probably going to be in a little bit more darkness. I think I was doing too much gel pen thinking yesterday with my video. Sometimes when I don't stamp in, 2 or 3 days, it feels like I haven't stamped in a month. Okay, let me see. Do I got that? Okay. Here we go. I did a gel pen video. I think I was using too much analytics or something like that. Too much left-brained activity or something. Okay, so filled in. This is a half-page scene, by the way. Okay, now I'm going to keep this color scheme pretty simple. We'll go over some kind of neutral tones in here, some warm tones with some browns, distress antique linen, walnut stain. I don't know, those are just the two that I happen to come to start using quite a bit lately. And what they are is two kind of warm tones, but they're kind of far enough away in value. Sometimes when I start using like the tea dye and things like that, it's so close to the antique linen, it's, it doesn't really do very much at all, so I like to just have a couple different values of those warm tones. Okay, now this is London Fog. I happen to have the Rinker for it, so when I use the Rinker fluid for my first color, it just goes on so much faster to do it that way than to, constantly dab in the pad. I mean, I will dab in the pad a little bit, but with these first applications of ink, I like to just get a nice, good slathering of it. Okay, this area is going to be light up here. That's where my kind of light beams are going to be coming in from, okay? Here's what the lighting scheme will be. Light here, okay? And I want my falling water areas to be roughly light. So light, light. Okay, this is where the waterfall is, right? And then light right here. Okay, so 1, 2, 3 areas. So just in general, I'll leave those areas roughly lighter than the other areas, okay? I like to leave my water fairly light, as it it directs the viewer's eye to the action of the scene. You don't want that water to be real dark. Okay, so watch this as I go in here. I'm just kind of, you can see it as like coloring the rocks or painting the rocks in. All right, there's some shadows down here in the water. You can see it in the designs themselves, the impressions, okay? You're like a lighting director on a stage. You can draw your viewers' attention to whatever you want them to look at by retaining the lighter areas. And the lighter areas look like you're shining a spotlight onto them, okay? So if you have a little person you're going to stamp somewhere, or someone canoeing in a lake, just leave an area of light for them. Or you can stamp them, ahead of time so you know exactly where they're going to go. a lot of times I do my little foreground elements or the subject matter of my pieces. A lot of times I stamp them last. See, I'm getting a little bit of streaking in here, and I re-inked my black pad so it's a little bit wet, so it's, kind of smearing some of that. I don't really worry about that because I have a lot of colors to come. Okay, now I am putting a little bit of tone up here, so it's not going to be, stark white up here, but there's going to be a little bit of tone in there. So, but look at this, we have our lighting scheme already developed, okay? There's no saying, where exactly you have to have your lights or darks. It's all up to you. I mean, I could tone this all out and just say it's in shadow, but I do like to have that water kind of standing out a little bit, okay? If you're working around a moon or something like that, then you're working around kind of more of a, a formal lighting, a light source within your scene, those areas like that. You just want to keep it, the lightest thing in the scene. You could make a sun yellow or something like that, but you just have to make everything around it a little bit darker so that it represents light, okay? Light sources, and oftentimes your reflected light are the lightest things in the scene, okay? But no, like I said, I don't want it stark white in this area in here, so I'll add some color to it, but just by and large, this is what you want. So, lighting scheme created here, and this first layer of colors is established. Okay, and it didn't take too long. I mean, that overall kind of first layer, and establishing light source took, what, a couple minutes maybe. Okay. Now see, what I'm doing is I'm fine-tuning this a touch. Sometimes it'll get a little bit darker just by using more ink, but when it really has achieved full saturation, it's just not going to get any darker. I could put 1,000 layers of the same color right over the top of it, and it's only going to get as dark as that color is. So that's when you know to move on to your next color. Okay. Okay, so anyway, came together pretty fast. This is like Stampscapes University in adding that general grayscale color scheme. We don't always have to work through a grayscale like that. You can work through colors and whatnot. Sometimes the colors are a little bit more vibrant when you add those in instead of gray. Gray tends to dull things out a little bit, but it's a really fast way to work, though. Okay, so antique linen here. I have a little bit of, yeah, I do have my antique linen re-inker here. I do want a pretty good slathering of that. I am changing my tip here to this clean side. This is the side that had the gray on there. I'll use the gray when I get up to the black, but I am changing hue here, so I think I will go with this clean tip here. Hopefully it's clean. Okay, so let's warm things up a little bit with this. This is a really dull color, okay? It's warm, but the dull, in terms of intensity, it's the perfect one to add in here because it's a little bit more neutral, but it is a warm tone, okay? So maybe I'll add some of this to my water. Maybe I'll make that water blue, I'm not sure. Kind of retain your areas of light or white in wherever you're adding this stuff. Don't lose your, as you move up incrementally through darker and darker tones, or just more and more layers, it doesn't have to get darker than this if you don't want to. But do try to retain that light. A lot of people lose their light. They usually don't lose it with their first color because they're very conscientious of it. But a lot of times when people are doing their first scenes like this, they get that first color down, they're getting really comfortable with the color addition process, and then they go like this, and then by this time it's like, oh my gosh, they wiped out all of their light, because they just kept going on and on with these incrementally darker tones, okay? So it's usually not in the first, couple colors, or at least the first color that they lose their light. Okay, so lighting is just all about the retention of that, lighter piece of paper. It doesn't have to be all completely white, but, you retain that. So when you get darker, just keep these areas of light, okay? That's what's hard for a lot of people. They're used to seeing, okay, this is all water down here, so they're caught in the mindset of outline styles of designs. There's no outlines anywhere in here, okay? So people are usually coloring in. They see this whole area, and they're just so locked into, okay, water is blue or something like that, or here's an area of water, that they fill everything in uniformly, okay? All lighting is color for lighting is about just the retention of some lights within that space. So when you move into darker tones, you just don't color in as much as you did. So really, lighting with coloring and lighting, it's about doing less coloring than what someone's used to. Sometimes people think that's harder to do, and it's harder because they have a hard time putting on the brakes. They want to color everything in, like a coloring book. This area in here is water, filling it in neutrally. Monotone, mono value, which actually. So you just have multiple values right here now. Okay, you have lighter areas and darker areas. Just kind of put on the brakes, okay? Like that rock right there. I kind of like that rock a little bit light, so instead of coloring in the whole thing, you just leave it. Okay? Okay. Brown on the rocks, like that. You can tone in rocks all kinds of different colors too. Maybe we'll use a little bit of green or something like that. Okay, that was the walnut stain. Okay. Okay, I just mentioned green. Let's try this. Let's try a little Distress Ink green, if I could find a clean applicator. Okay, this one's peeled paint. Let's try this a little bit in some areas, okay? See if we can give the rocks a little bit of a kind of a different character. Maybe there's some moss on some of these rocks. It doesn't have to be kind of uniformly colored with this. You can just kind of put some here and there. All right, so we have some variation within here now. Okay, let's try some blues in here. Let's try to add a little bit of blue elements within this space. We'll do it down here in the water. Let's go with let's go with the little summer sky memento. Okay, now here it is. I'm adding some of it to my waterfalls, okay? But I want to retain some of that really light area, so I'm not coloring in everything like this. Put a little hint of it here and there, okay? But still retain some of that white of the paper. Doesn't have to be a lot, but retain some of it. Okay. Now, just to bring a little continuity to the rest of the piece, I'll add some of this blue, believe it or not, on my rocks as well. It won't read as, there's blue or something like that, but it'll add a little bit of just tonal continuity to the piece as a whole, okay? Here's my re-inker. Plan on using quite a bit of it. You won't be able to tell in a lot of areas. It'll just be very, very subtle. Okay, I could barely see it at all here, and I'm right next to it. Okay. Okay, we'll add it into this area up here as well. Okay. Remember how I said, you know, on these trees and things like that, well, if it doesn't stamp out perfectly, it doesn't matter. You can see why at this point in time, right? You know, because when you add in different types of colors and whatnot, like that area there, I kind of illuminated the wrong side of it, but it doesn't really even matter, okay? A lot of things in the whole process, kind of in the building of a scene, you know, if you get something that was unintentional and doesn't look right at that stage in the development of some scene, it really doesn't matter, you know? By the time you start coloring everything in, I mean, we haven't even added in foreground. If I did something just I hate this area, you know, you just put a tree there, you know, or something like that. And suddenly, you know, the tree would probably enhance the piece. Not only that, it kind of obscures the weaker areas, potentially, and adds strength to it, so all really easy and forgiving. And I don't know, isn't that what we want out of kind of a creative endeavor? You want to be able to build things up, and you want to be able to, you know, potentially change on a dime, you know, with kind of the original, from the original concepts. Maybe not 180 degrees or something like that, but you kind of, you move and you alter your kind of final destination in terms of the concept a little bit, you know. Now, like, for me, I don't even have like a really definitive vision in mind of what this scene's going to look like, or any of my scenes are going to look like. Because I just know things are going to switch around. I usually just have kind of a general concept in mind. Now, if I am going to try to copy something, you know, directly, then, you know, I might have something in mind, like, you know, if I'm kind of referencing a photograph or something of that sort, then, you know, I'm trying to stay on task, for at least for most of the scene. But when it gets to the end, I always know that it's just kind of better to go with the flow and to change up and to allow your scene to kind of dictate or direct where it wants to go. Is it going to be a darker scene? Is it going to be lighter, you know? Does it look fine as is? And if you add anything more, it'll kind of overwork it. Then you can always stop, you know? Maybe you intended things to get a little bit different, you know, darker or something like that, I'm saying. Okay, this is adding in black, so I'm kind of adding a nice vignette around this. When you move into your darker tones, you're kind of adding in your shadow work, and what that does is it really anchors your scenes down. Be careful when you're using black. If you kind of used a lot of the other colors, though, it allows the black to really blend in to the you know, the scene like this. So that's why I like using quite a bit of the other tones, because when you get into these darker tones, they're really easy to blend and manipulate. When the page is still too really dry, you know, you don't want to get like hard shapes. Now, I'm not toning in like this. Okay, I'm just doing this as an example, but see, this is on dry piece of paper. That isn't going to move. But see down here, like an area like this, even if I squeezed out a bunch, I have this, see that big, you know, blob of ink, it just spreads right in like that. And that's because of all those other colors that I used. So that's one of the benefits, too, of using the re-inkers. It really kind of saturates the page, you know, the paper surface, and it makes these other colors, the darker ones, that are the most prone to leaving, you know, an undesirable mark. It makes them very easy to just spread in like that, okay? So I'm working this in a little area, and I'm tapering it up a little bit. So I'm going from darker, okay, because that's the most amount of coverage. And then I'm using my drier version, and I'm kind of working that out so I get this kind of tapered transition here, like that, okay? I like to have the shadows a little bit darker right next to the objects that are casting the shadow, okay? So like this rock here, it's a little bit darker in here, and then as I move away from it, it's getting lighter, okay? Does that make sense? Tone in some of these rocks here. You can kind of add additional tone where the rocks are darker in the actual impression, the design. So you can just kind of reiterate, okay, that rock is really dark right there. I'll add a little bit of extra tone to it. So I will enhance what's already in the designs. So if there's a shaded area in the design, then just darken it. That's your cue as a really good potential area to tone in. Okay, so I kind of give you a head start with all my shadow work on my designs. You can shade it in with color and additional black, let's say. Okay, so see there's kind of areas of illumination now. We have 3 areas of light, 1, 2, 3, and through this entire toning process, I've retained those 3 areas of light. Even when I move into black, I'm careful not to tone in there, okay? So see, everything looks a little bit more 3-dimensional that way. We've retained some areas of light, some other areas are dark. It wouldn't have been wrong to keep this area light and tone in this area, but it's creating this varied look in here now. Okay, like this rock right here, maybe I can tone that one out like that. It makes that rock stand out a little bit more, doesn't it? So it's just kind of there's no definitive thing where you have to keep one rock light. Oh my God, I did the wrong rock. No, it's not like that. Just treat them differently, just for variety and variation. All right. Now, a lot of you have alcohol pens, right? A lot of you have a lot of alcohol pens too. So, what you can do is you can grab some pens kind of in the same color scheme that you just toned in with. I mean, you could color a whole scene too with alcohol pens if you want to. Just keep the same concepts in mind. It's not changing the concept. You would keep certain areas light, and you'd make other areas darker, and you'd kind of try to make your forms nice and round, okay? You do that same thing with various values. Here's a green, a couple greens. This one's kind of like the brownish green. This is jungle green right here. Here's a aquamarine and pale blue, right? Pale blue is kind of like summer sky in a way, right? Somewhere in between these two. Okay, so anyways, let's use some of these. You might as well use. So sometimes people will say, okay, do you want to do that? Do I do that scene using this or that? Well, why don't you use the media for the strengths that each one has? These are, narrow tipped, right? So these can get into those harder to reach areas, right? So why not use this for your detail work? Look at this, I can come down in my, falling water right here and add it to some specific areas. Don't color in the whole thing, because remember, you want to keep some areas light. But I can come in here and I can kind of enhance that a little bit with a few little streaks like this, or I can get in the shadows back in here. Remember how we brought in some blue over our rocks? You come in here like this as well and bring some of this into it. Nice thing is about alcohol inks is that it doesn't mix and blend with the dye-based inks, because the dye-based inks are water-based. You could use La Plume watercolor pens, though, to color in like this, too. Just, make sure that you're not smearing anything. But it should be fine, to enhance, okay? So I guess I could bring this up in my sky. Notice what I'm doing here, too, with this one? It's really light in value, just like I started light in value with my dye-based inks for the coloring process, okay? At no point in time is any of this kind of a precarious type of thing, where it's like calligraphy or something like that, where if you kind of put something down, it's like, oh my gosh, that is set and fixed and there's nothing you can do about it, This is just one really light tone after another one, or incrementally, just a little bit darker as we go each step of the way. Okay, let's try a little bit of a darker blue, okay? It's not a, where'd it go? Okay, right here, aquamarine. It's not a dark blue, but it's just a little bit darker than the previous one. It's just taking a little incrementally darker tone. Although by no means a dark blue, it's really pale, but it's darker at least than the previous one. Okay, let's see here. Okay, here's a little bit of green. You can do it in kind of textures too. You know how lichen looks on like a rock? I can put little textures like this instead of just coloring. You kind of add little textural marks like this. I don't like it as is, but what I'll do is I'll blend this back in, to these rocks here with another pen, different color. Adding lichen here to the boulders with lichen image. It's a very textured image. Alright, that was the jungle green. Let's go with brownish gray. Okay, add some of this in like so. Alright, now let's go to this one. This one's a melon. Okay, I think I'm actually going to use my blender pen, if I could find it. Oh, here it is right here. Just my blender, okay? And I'm going to go into these textures right here and just kind of smooth some of them away. I don't want to smooth everything away because I always want to keep it still textured, but I want that separation that happens with alcohol inks when you go in with that blender. Kind of real subtle changes here with this. And I added some of this blue into my falls. Right over here I used a little bit too much, so I'm just using the blender to lift some of that alcohol ink off. You can actually lift some of it off with a blender on glossy cardstock like this. Okay, and I can blend in some of those streaks a little bit more. I really don't need to with what we're going to be adding in here, but... Okay, so that is that. How does that look? You know, those pens, alcohol inks are really fun to use, or just markers in general, in order to enhance things a little bit, or quite a lot. It's kind of both. It enhances things cumulatively, you know, when you do like several ones, but with each pen and color, if you're working from really light to dark, it's really, really incrementally changing. But I think in terms of an overall spirit of things, you know, it really can add, you know, a decent amount to it. Especially when you do a lot of little subtle, easy additions to something like this. Cumulatively, it adds up to a greater whole, you know, more than whatever you call it, the sum of the parts. Okay, so we have these in here like so. Okay, so I'm going to create these beams of light coming through here, so that there's going to be mist coming up from here. All right. I'm trying to think of the process to do this. And do I do the beams first, or do I do the mist from this coming up here? It might be a little bit of both. Okay. All right. So I have my very worked cotton ball here. I need to get some more cotton. This is my last one, so I'm really utilizing it quite a lot. And we have our pigment ink. Okay, so if you learn this pigment ink process right here, it will add so much to your scenic stamping, whatever. I mean, you can do it with word stamps too. You can have this, you know, word stamp kind of illuminated or whatever, but it really adds a lot. And what everyone does is they just go and they blob too much down. They think, oh my god, it's so hard, or something like that. But unlike shading, you know, going from, you know, dark to light, with illumination, you're going from light to dark. Okay? So you start in the light. That's why I had you retain your light when you're doing this. Okay? You're starting in the light like this and adding, you're just dabbing it down. You want to dab it down where it's like you can't see anything, okay? But don't just say, oh, I can't see anything with one tap, so I'm going to really smash it down on there. You just kind of keep dabbing it down like, you know, really lightly, and then you're working this into the lighter areas like this, okay? See how I'm going inside, outside, inside, tapping, then moving out. So I get this really nice transition going from light to dark like that, because I'm adding more ink here and less ink over here. Okay? So really concentrate it a lot more around your lightest areas, okay? See at the base of this fall right here? See that right there? And this again, this is, I know I was going to do this, you don't have to add in this pigment ink, but it is sure fun to do, and I would recommend, you know, giving it a try. But this is another reason why. Remember I said, oh, that didn't really stamp out that great? Well, first of all, because the coloring filled it in anyway. And then this goes in here, so actually kind of having the stamp not stamp out perfectly clear in that area, maybe it gave me a head start because it's lighter in there, where I'm adding this light element. See that? How that mist right there is kind of creeping over here. So I'm bringing it in from the light into the dark, but in the darker area right here, I just have it kind of trail off. I'll add a little bit more, because when this pigment ink dries, it's going to dry darker than how it looks when it's freshly applied. I don't know why, but it does that. So you kind of have to add a little bit more in than you think you're going to need. Or just add it in, wait till it dries and see what it looks like, and if you need to add more, then just go on with more layers. Okay, see that right in there? Isn't that really fun? Now look at this rock right here. this rock is sitting in front of that waterfall, right? It's in the foreground. But let's bring some of this mist here out and around. See, it's light down here? And let's bring it in here. So look at this. I'm enveloping that rock in some of this mist. Okay? This is all visual stuff, and this is all two-dimensional, right? This is a two-dimensional piece of paper. It's all 2D. But when you do something like this, it feels more kinesthetic, okay? It feels more like this element in here is three-dimensional. And now you have this kind of element of moisture, okay? That's what it represents, right? Mist is moisture, illuminated, and it's being illuminated by the light here. But now, doesn't that feel a little bit more kinesthetic? You have things wrapping around something, so you're kind of triggering different senses when you do this too. And when you do this too, like, if you've ever been, like, around a waterfall or moving water, there's this different sound in the air because sound moves slower. It's broken apart more by all of this moisture in the air. So there's this kind of auditory type of feeling that you get here. So I say feeling, that's kinesthetic, but there's a sense of these different things. You start triggering different things. So in crafting, we're dealing with, visual things, okay, all the time. But in here, this is a visual representation of kind of a kinesthetic and auditory experience that you'll be having when looking at something. That's why everyone likes looking at sunsets, is because sunsets, the air around us is kind of glowing. It turns yellow and orange and whatever. So we're looking at things. It's not just in the sky, but it's all these colors around us are surrounding us. That's why we feel this kind of feeling looking at sunsets, because we're visually aware of space around us, the glowing type of air that's around us, dust particles, moisture, whatever. Could be pollution even, what I mean? But we're aware of that air around us more when we're looking at colored light. It just shows, we're at high noon, we're not usually gazing and, marveling at air, okay? Unless we're in a foggy area still at noon or something like that, but it's a different experience. Okay, so see that right down here? So it's really glowing like that. Doesn't it have a different feel to it? Okay, so I'm starting in the lighter area, and I'm working into the darker area like that. I can't tell you how many times this kind of look has really saved my pieces. Sometimes things don't look good at all in some of my scenes, but I just know that when I add in those little touches like this, it brings it all together and all's well in the world. See this rock down here? I mean, that rock looks fine to me as is. Okay. Let me see if I can get this focus in here. Here we go. This rock right here, just sitting there by itself. I mean, that looks fine to me, but let's bring in a little bit of this fog. It's like, this fog is like hugging it or something like that, There's this kind of welcoming type of thing when you're, it's like nature is, and it's illuminated too, right? So it's like it's being illuminated by light, so everyone, you would love that, right? To be kind of engulfed in, beautiful illumination. Which you are when you're outside, but just having this element like this, you're aware of it more, with the moisture, because it's being illuminated by that lighting, the air around us. In this case, it's really moist air. Okay, so anyways, we have that. A little bit more dreamy. I kind of went extreme because, like I said, it's going to dry, and when it dries darker looking. Okay, so this right here, you can come in like that a little bit. Streak like that. All right. Okay. So this now see this scene right here for me has taken on a little bit of a different look. I expected it to be lighter when I first started. So when I come in with these light beams in here, I'm not going to make them quite as extreme because this looks like it's a little bit more subtle of a lighting scheme within, in that area. Okay, so let me grab a couple pieces of paper. Let's see, where's my blotter paper? Let me grab some. Okay, a couple pieces of just regular copy paper. All right, this is our light source in here. I'll try to pick some, much more specific area here. I'll put it like the space in between these two trees right here, and right in the middle of them like that. Okay. I mean, you don't need pinpoint accuracy. But see, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have these beams of light coming in through here, and they'll emanate from that general area. Okay, so, all right, let's see. I want some of that light to be coming in like so. Okay, now see that I'll have a beam. This is what I was thinking about with the original concept. I'll have this kind of beam coming in here, and maybe this beam will be a little bit stronger right around where that churning water is lifting up this, these pillars of mist, okay? So it'll be a little bit lighter, a little bit fainter, and lighter again down here, and it'll trail off that way. If you haven't seen what, me doing these beams before, you probably don't know what I'm talking about, but I'll show you what I mean here. Okay, so I don't have a straight beam. I have a little bit flared like this, okay? So it looks like it's coming at us in perspective. I have to kind of remember where... Okay, so this is going to get lighter right here and right over here. Okay, so you know what I was saying about that tapering of the illumination. Okay, so a little bit more right around the source of the light. Okay, and coming in here, and it's a little bit lighter because I can see that light area, and where it starts getting dark throughout here, I won't add too much. I'll have enough where you can kind of see it, but I won't add too much. And then where it starts moving into this lighter area right here, I'll go for a little bit of a stronger beam, okay? So it's kind of petering out right there in the darkness. I'll have it get a little bit more illuminated right over here. Let's see where this gets dark again down here. I'll weaken the beam out here. It doesn't have to be perfectly smooth either, you have like different trees or things like that are blocking, the light in some areas. We call these crepuscular rays. Okay, see that right there? See how it kind of fades off right here? It gets a little bit lighter right here, okay? Now let's add some more. Let's add a beam behind this tree going this way, okay? We'll start it. It'll emanate from right here, and it'll come right across there. Maybe this one will be a little bit more distant. So maybe I'll have this narrower, okay? Let me see, where did that go? Okay, that's the tree that I want it coming from behind. Okay, so just taper it off a little bit lighter in here where it's light, and then as it moves into these darker areas, just a little bit less. It doesn't even have to make it all the way over here, too, if you don't want to. You can kind of have it kind of taper off to nothing. Okay. So you have that beam kind of back there. See how it's kind of weaker like that? Let's bring another one in here, right across. Let's get a little bit more bold right across here. maybe this will be, one will be really close to us, so I'll keep it a little bit wider. Okay. Taper it off in the darker part. Okay. I'll add quite a bit right here, where it's right there in the water portion, churning water down here. Seeing it, you can see it's, light right there. So, okay, something like that. Let's go with a real kind of narrow one back here. I'll really break it up. Something like that. Okay. All right. Now, after I do these beams, I don't just leave it like that. It's a little bit too much, so I kind of mellow them out, and we'll kind of blend them in a little bit more. But what I do like to do is I like to multi-layer some of these beams too. So let's go on this one. Let's add a really kind of narrow beam over the top of this other beam. Okay, so I'm kind of going within the beam. So I'm trying to give depth kind of within the beam itself. Kind of like that right there. Okay. Okay, now let's see. Let's kind of add a little bit more illumination right around the source of illumination, okay? So on the side of that tree, where the light is coming from, where we lightened it up to begin with, by not stamping it out so dark, we're just going and reiterating it. So like in shading, where I said you can just kind of darken areas of the shadows that are in the design. Well, here, we're just lightening up this area as well with additional light now, just like we added in shadows where it was dark. Okay. You can go to the top of the waterfall right here. See that tree right there? It's really being illuminated. It's really too much, but we'll see how that looks when it dries. And it'll start drying really quickly here. So you see I'm adding quite a bit of this right where in the source of illumination. And I can add it a little bit more in the sky. Okay, now here it's starting to get a little bit duller, so I'm going into it with some additional white right around that churning water, because it's like I said, it's getting a little bit darker as it dries here. Okay, now I'm going to fine-tune some of these beams. What I wanted to do really was I wanted to really kind of change the intensity of that glow in the area where there's mist, where the waterfalls were kind of affecting the amount of illumination within that beam. So let's go and do some of that. I want real varied beam strengths, okay? In portions of beams, not, I don't want it uniformly strong. Well, like a spotlight or something like that. See that? It's a little bit stronger, a little weaker, weaker. Yeah, it's kind of coming together, isn't it, though? That area up here looks kind of more interesting with, the more pigment ink I put into that area. The beams were kind of a certain strength, so I think I really needed to strengthen the source of light here with some additional pigment ink, okay? Let's go a little bit more here with that beam. Okay, something like that. This one right here peters out too much. Okay. Let's add a little bit more here. Okay, something like that. Okay. I think where I strengthened it, I'm almost strengthened it a little bit too much. I'll need that to really kind of mellow out a little bit. But I think it's where it needs to be, because when it dries, it'll kind of take care of itself. In terms of kind of incorporating in with the rest of the scene. Okay, so that is the soft illumination texture. And oh good. I washed out my my splatter painting brush right here. My old toothbrush, my handy toothbrush. I need to create a travel toothbrush because when I packed it for a demonstration at a convention, it kind of smashed my bristles. It's been kind of taking a while for it to get back to the viscosity I like to have it at. Or not the viscosity, but the stiffness. I was talking about gel pens too much yesterday. Viscosity of inks. Okay, so this is opaque white. Bleed-proof white. It's an opaque white watercolor paint. Okay? It's by Dr. Martens. Dr. P.H. Martens. I don't know if it's the same Dr. Martens. There's Dr. Martens dyes. You would think it'd be the same thing, but Dr. Martens bleed-proof white. Okay. Oh, and applied in a splatter painting methodology. I find the old toothbrush does the trick. Okay. You reconstitute your bleed-proof white to kind of like a syrup texture. Okay. Like maple syrup. Okay. And what we're going to do is we're going to hit that churning water down here with a little bit of splatter painting touch. Okay, let's see if we can get this here. See if I capture it on camera. Okay, I'd say about 3 inches away, 2 to 3 inches away. Okay, now we're not just going to, splatter the whole thing like that. I'm usually just doing a couple bristles at, any given time. Okay, and I'll try to direct it. Sometimes I go like this, and it ends up going over here, so I have to angle it up like this. So I have to find the right kind of splatter angle to hold my toothbrush at. It's kind of shooting out this way and that way. Okay, there it is. holding it like this, it's kind of ended up over here. Am I capturing that on camera? I hope so. Okay, you see that kind of crisp little splash pattern down there? Isn't that kind of dynamic and fun? See it right up here? Look at that, it's like flicking up in little light. It's like little highlights, little illumination of light too in addition to texture, okay? So let's see the difference between here. You can also draw these in, with the little gel pen. I do little splashes and things like that, but that's with it without. That's with. Okay, let's add some more over here. Okay, so you have it down here now as well. It's a little bit more dynamic, huh? Let's add a little bit more here. All right, I think that's it for that. That is really fun to do. Okay, so versifying black. Final touches. Let's grab something that could be used effectively in the foreground. Okay. Looking for my branch, my leaves here somewhere. Okay, pausing video. I need to find an image. Okay, let's add in some foreground elements here. We might go with multiples. It doesn't have to be one or the other. Alright, this is my leaves stamp. Just represents some kind of bush here in the foreground. Okay. And I'm doing this in the VersaFine. VersaFine is a very dark, very crisp black. And when you have things that are really dark in the foreground, it really pushes distance within a piece. Okay, see that right there? Even in a very dark area, VersaFine shows up pretty well like that. See that right there? I could even have it overhanging over here too. Oh, might as well. I'm putting it up there to really contrast against that light, like that. Oops. And stamp it fully right there. I might be stamping it into a hole here too. I was pounding my gel pens here yesterday. Let me put another impression up here. Or a couple impressions. Let's see. Let's go like this. Okay. Okay. See that right there? It's kind of effective against that area of light, isn't it? The way it pushes depth. We'll go for a couple different layers of textural shapes right here. This is the reeds. All right. See this area down here below, like that. Adding that, I really like that up there. You know, these kind of overhanging tree limbs like that into that light. It kind of directs the viewers, it kind of contained that area of light up there too. And it pushed contrast too, having something really dark right next to those light beams like that. It looks like it's just kind of flowing right through them. Okay, I wasn't going to do that, but I like that so much. I wasn't going to put anything over here. I thought, okay, that's enough up there, enough leaves, but I think that looks pretty good. Let me just put a little bit of it here, just a touch of them, okay? 1/4 inch, 1/8 of an inch, just a couple little elements up there to kind of cap the top off a little bit more, like that. Those ones, see that? All right. So I don't think it needs it here, but let's just see if we can kind of enhance anything here with some additional white paint pen work, okay? Sometimes we can direct lighting, just that one extra step, you know, with some additional highlights on something. White gel pen, or you can do colored gel pens too, like say we want to get a little texture on those rocks, we can do that with some gel pen work. Maybe we'll try that. Whenever I start to work multiple multimedia, sometimes I forget about, you know, some of these other things that we can add on. But in a piece that I really like, I like to really kind of finalize things with some additional little highlights here and there. So on the top sides of some of these rocks, just to, you know, make them really look like they're capturing some of that light. See, like this beam of light right here? Alright, I'm going to really zoom in here. I will try my best to remember to zoom out so I'm not working off camera. Okay, so on some of these rocks right around that beam, I've put in some additional little highlights, okay? Like that. Okay, so on the top sides of a rock, I'll put a little dots like that to make it look like it's being top lit. Okay. Let's move over here. Let me change the exposure of this camera too. Now that the scene's kind of dark, it's overexposing. Okay, that's better. A little bit more indicative of what the color, the value of the scene is. Okay, see these top sides of some of these rocks right here? Let's put a few little highlights on them. Like so. Few little individual splashes. You know, it's really hard to direct exactly where those splashes are going to go when you're doing the splatter painting. So if there's any particular area where, you know, where you want a little bit of variation or something like that, bigger splash, you know, larger dot, you can just add it with something like this. Okay. Let's look at some of these rocks right back up in here. The light's coming from over this way. So I can add some, you know, a few little highlights on some of these rocks. Kind of facing that light. Falls right here, kind of varying the illumination of them a little bit. Some of those I darken them in a little bit too much, and you can just lighten them back up with the use of something like, you know, a gel pen or a paint pen like this. See some of these rocks on here where there's a lot of different textures like this on the image. Let me see if I can show you. Here's this waterfall right here. Okay, now see where I've kept this illumination, or I've designed this illumination into these areas. You just go back into them. Now I've colored them in, but you can go in and highlight those areas. See, I'm highlighting the lighter areas too in the falling water, but right on here I can just add a few little dots so you can darken in the shadows and you lighten the lights. See, like that? It just makes that area a little bit more, I don't know, maybe three-dimensional, I think. Okay, see these branches up here in the light? I'm just going in and highlighting them. They're really light branches because of the amount of pigment ink I used over the top of it, and plus we didn't, you know, ink, you know, we removed some of the ink before we made the impressions as well, so this is a way to go back in and reiterate that lighting, or that highlighting maybe a little bit more. Okay. Let's take a look at this. I mean, these are subtle little things. I mean, when we hold this, you know, when we zoom out like this and hold it up, it's, you know, it's hard to tell anything, but it's when you come in like this and you see these little highlights on things. You know, I think it just it kind of wakes up the piece and it makes those little areas glisten and kind of shimmer a little bit. You know, not physically like shimmer as in, you know, like a metallic or something like that, but it sparkles. It brings certain little areas to life that are otherwise kind of boring, you know. I have to be careful around these impressions with the VersaFine because they're very, very wet right now. They take a little bit of time to dry. Maybe overnight for me, you know, where I live. Okay, so that is that. I talked all about gel pens and paint pens yesterday in a video. Let's go in and let's add a little bit of that. Here's a green extra fine point paint pen. Turquoise, aqua turquoise. And I'm using that because it's kind of the color scheme in here. And I don't want too much of it. Gotta shake the paint pen up. You can also use gel pens or whatever. And I'll just, you know, I might add a little bit of a little texture in here. You know, these are kind of lichen-covered rocks, and you can color the put a little texture in on them. I'm kind of doing them in an area where it won't stand out too much, but if someone held this up, you know, be able to get a little bit of that fine detail experience or reward from, you know, really inspecting the piece. Okay, now remember the kind of walnut stain and antique linen that we used in there. Those are kind of, you know, peachish tones, right? So here's this peach right here. You know, peach is kind of a, you know, a light brown, tan, a little bit of a warmer one, but let's add a little touch of that on a couple of these rocks. Yeah, it really stands out, so I won't add too much, but it's just a little touch of warmth in there, like so. All right, there you have it. Beams over false. The beams are kind of, you know, I kind of got a little bit where they're illuminated like that, and then it peters out in the darkness, and then it kind of illuminates a little bit more. I wanted that a little bit more extreme, like maybe that could be a little bit lighter. See, I like that, how it kind of illuminates in the lighter area, like that's where it's light, and then it kind of dies out like that. Maybe I can kind of emphasize that by removing a little of this ink right here, a little bit more. Let's try some of that. This is like my ink removal system, and you can do this with your finger. It just comes right off. That's why you'll need to spray seal these and to seal down, you know, those beams a little bit more. After they dry. Okay. Okay, so see that right there? I've kind of taken some of that ink off just by dabbing it a little bit. There, actually, that looks better. That's kind of more in the spirit of what I wanted it to be. I wanted these beams stronger where that mist is rising, you know, so we get that illumination happening around the falls. Yeah, that's about right. Okay, the background's a little bit too bright, isn't it? Let's darken that a little, or a lot, like this. Gotta use your own tools, huh? Alright, so that's kind of, yeah, it's really subduing that background beam, huh? Let's even taper it off to nothing here. Or almost nothing. Yeah, let's take a little bit of paper towel. almost like the finger better. The finger, it's removing exactly what I want, but my finger's a little bit coated with white paint now. Okay. Okay, so, okay, that looks better, huh? See, that background beam is kind of in the darkness, so it's really faint, brighter, and brighter in these areas right around the falls. Okay, so anyways, hope you enjoyed this scene. It was certainly fun. This type of thing like this has all the little tricks that I like using in a piece. Stamping out the scene's one thing. I like, kind of directing light, and that, it can be a pretty fast process in terms of defining your light. I go all the way to black, and I add those tones in there, but I really like doing the lights in terms of the diffusion of soft light, which is your pigment ink, okay? And then I love doing kind of sharp little bits of light, crisp bits of light with things like, your bleed-proof white in the splatter painting. Like that. So those little specks, kind of glowing like that. In addition to things like this, I didn't do too much of this. This one's really quite subtle in here, but, it's pretty effective. You see those little gel paint pen marks in there? See that little textural elements on the rocks with that gel? There's a little bit of green right there. But it's where the white ones are, those little highlights like that. See like that? Even those couple, what is there? It's like 7 dots. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. See that? How that kind of brings that little area to life like that. This could be a perfect little fairy thing too, don't you think? If you do these little dots, around in here like this, and you add a little bit of pigment ink over the top of them, it creates this little kind of glowing little fairy looking element in here. Maybe I'll do that. These little orbs, okay? Every time I think I'm done, I'm not. I start talking about it. If I didn't talk about it and do these videos, I'd be done. But kind of when I start thinking out loud, sometimes something comes to mind. So let's do a little bit of a larger dot in a couple areas like this. Okay, and I'll add these in these areas where there's not a lot going on. Okay, so there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and let's go like that. Okay. Okay, so those have to be allowed to dry a little bit. I'm going to let them set up for a minute or so. Okay, because if I start adding the pigment ink over the top of it, if they're wet, they might just kind of disappear. Okay, so we have our cotton swab and our pigment ink. You want to add a light application of it here. This is perfect. This is so dark down here from stamping, so what I don't want is that. Like that big blob, okay? What I want is just a faint little glow. So what I do is I dab a lot of that ink off of here. It smashes down the tip a little bit. Try to use a real cotton swab to it. The acrylic ones like that, and the acrylic cotton balls, I guess it's not a cotton ball, but they just don't work as good as natural fibers. And it just doesn't go on as smooth, At least for this purpose. Okay, so, let's take a look at these. Okay, so there's my 2 little orbs. Let's make them glow, okay? Just kind of lightly dabbing, and through several dabs, we have that little glowing little sphere, right? So like 10 light taps, okay? And try to create a little bit of a diffusion as it moves away from that, okay? Start lightly, like that, okay? That was 8 taps. 9 right there. You see those little orbs like that? Are those kind of fun? You can do them in different colors too if you want to, instead of white. Okay, so it's just things like these little glowing orbs like that. Now they're standing out a little bit right now because they're just freshly tapped. Okay, maybe I'll add a little bit more of this down here at the base. These waterfalls. You can get real specific into little specific areas with cotton swab like this, as opposed to the cotton ball. Fine tuning, huh? All right. I was done like 15 minutes ago, huh? But adding those little things in there and then using that cotton swab, it's like I might as well, just keep using it and adding a little bit more here and there. The more you kind of do, the more things kind of are revealed that where you can add a little bit of extra to enhance. All right, but look at this. A lot of textural lighting in here. Do you see what I mean by kind of the enveloping of certain types of images? Doesn't it take on kind of a different tactile quality? And there's a certain type of essence to something like this where you envelop things. Like I said, this works really great for certain things too. I mean, you can stamp out word stamps and you can envelop them in a little bit of air like that, and it changes the spirit of it. They look more three-dimensional because you're saying that something is kind of hovering in space as opposed to kind of this reiteration of the two-dimensional, right? It looks a little bit more spatial like that. And you start to enter in kind of that feeling of visual space in terms of depth, kind of brought about by lighting. And when you're doing something like this, adding that mist in there, it feels like illuminated light enveloping certain objects, giving them a more three-dimensional feel, okay? I don't do this on every scene, okay, you know, but on something like this, I think it really enhances it. And then, of course, those light beams like that are really fun. It's a fun addition. They almost become like the star of the scene, in which they were. I think they're competing against these little orbs now, and these little fairies, you know, those little fairies kind of take on their own kind of spirit, you know, and having that kind of little illuminated little bits of light like that kind of add a little bit of a visual interest into those areas, but kind of an overall kind of, you know, reasonably deep visual space now, you know, through different textural additions to, you know, a two-dimensionally stamped surface here. So a lot of fun, and I don't know, I just love adding those little things like that and watching certain areas and objects kind of come to life right before your eyes. As you saw, you know, there were certain things, issues, you know, within my stamped impressions. I need to clean my stamps off, you know, maybe when I clean off my toothbrush, I'll scrub in here and get, you know, some of that oil-based, you know, not stays on, but the versifying off of here, which I have a feeling is kind of creating that kind of resistance to the water-based imagery. Or I did use the hybrids on there too. It's probably the hybrids. I think I stamped out. Yeah, I did stamp that waterfall scene out with the hybrids, and the hybrids have some oil-based ink in there. So anyway, there you have it. Thanks so much for watching. If you have any questions, drop me a note in the comment section. And if you choose to do this scene yourself, let me know how it goes. And if you run into any problems, send me a photo. Everyone has camera phones these days, it seems, and you can send me an email file of it, and we'll take a look at it. All right, so there was a lot of little refinements in terms of pigmenting, but like I said, if you don't like it, you can just rub it right off, you know. You saw me dab that off. If I don't like a beam altogether, you just wipe it off with a paper towel. It comes right off glossy. So as long as it's your traditional white pigment ink and not something like a Brilliance fast-drying permanent one. Okay, thanks for tuning in to the channel. And once again, thanks as always for your support of the line.